damage here really in most personal injury cases is the spectral pain and suffering or
Yeah.
loss of enjoyment of life. So why don't you briefly kind of talk about in general what that is, and then we'll kind of talk about proving those.
So they are sort of more subjective than objective. Economic harm is very easy because you can oftentimes attach a dollar amount to it. That exercise becomes a little bit more difficult when you're talking about loss of enjoyment of life or suffering. But sometimes we can use examples in the market to help us peg a dollar value to something. For instance, if someone once really enjoyed jet skiing and due to a lower back injury, they're no longer able to jet ski, but that was something they did every weekend with their family, then they had to sell their jet skis. We know what the value of jet skiing is in the market because we have jet ski rentals. So we know that the market demands, $60 or $70 or $80 a day, whatever the case might be, for a jet ski rental. And again, if that's permanent, then we know that someone typically jet skis 30 weekends out of the year times 20 more years times $80 a day. That just gave us a value for his loss of enjoyment of life. Mm-hmm. If someone typically golfs, again, we know what the market value of that is. So we look for examples like that to try to peg a market value to an activity or a hobby. And the same thing can be said of other ways that an injury might impact somebody. Some people like to garden. Some people like to, just keep up with their house, their household chores, or even if they don't like doing it, they have to.
Exactly. They have to do it. And
again, we know what the value of that is because there are cleaning services. So we can say, well, they're not able to do this. Now they have to hire outside cleaning services. That's, $40 a day for a cleaning times however many weeks, times however many years. So we try to come up with math. The suffering can be difficult, especially when you have multiple injuries. It's important that, we try to frame the conversation and argument with regards to each specific injury. Because when you have more than one, if the tendency is to kind of clump the suffering together, it can devalue it. But if we can say, well, we know what a jury has paid or rewarded people for a neck injury, then we have that number. And then we know what a jury has awarded someone for, a humeral head fracture, for instance, then we have that separate. Now, we'd like to talk about those things separately so we can talk to the insurance adjusters and say, well, this is what this case is worth because they have this injury, but they also have this injury. So if we can keep those separate, that gives us a little bit more leverage. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to what would a jury award this person for this type of injury? And that can come down to the venue. I mean, as we know, certain venues, even within the same state, have drastically different average jury awards.
Wildly different.
Wildly different. So the value of one injury in one county might be drastically different from the value of that injury in another county. So thankfully we have tools. We can pull old jury awards, look at medical costs, look at, the type of injury and see what juries have done with it. And sometimes for some injuries, when we can't really peg an economic value to it and we're just talking about, the degree of suffering for, a soft tissue neck injury is always the one. We're kind of stuck with what do juries do with it and what's the likelihood? How is this case consistent with those cases? How is this case different from those cases? What's the likelihood that we exceed that average? What's the likelihood that we're below that average? So we're always talking about a probability curve because there's no set number when it comes to things like suffering.
Okay. So